Hey, this is Barry. This is Extraordinary Stories Podcast, and this is something slightly different. A story in parts. Welcome to The Body on the Beach, Part 3, The Investigation. The witness describes seeing a figure standing on the pier of Preswick Beach. Was this the figure of Annie Filofax? The witness was a local man who went for a walk along the promenade of Preswick Beach around 4:30 on the afternoon of Saturday, 3rd December. This was around the time Annie would have arrived there, having walked from the airport. The witness says the figure was standing at the water's edge, looking out. The figure was still, and from the distance, he said it could have been male and it could have been female. He walked his dog for a further 30 minutes down the promenade, and while making his way back home, he noticed the figure was still standing there. It hadn't moved at all, and it continued to stare at the water. There was no one else around, remembers the witness. He thought nothing more of it at the time. He says he did consider the possibility that this could be someone thinking about suicide, but that he put this thought from his mind. The following day, when Annie's body was discovered, he thought again about the figure he had seen. So Preswick Beach. Allow me to just tell you a little about Preswick Beach. If you read a tourist guide, you'll read it described as a sandy beach with an esplanade running alongside it. From the beach, you can look over into the hills of the Isle of Arran, and you can see the aeroplanes taking off and landing at the nearby airport. Photos of it are artfully taken at dusk. The reality is that the beach was named Scotland's worst beach in 2016. It is full of pebbles and rocks and debris. It now hosts a sign which tells dog owners to be aware of broken glass and sharp objects. Scottish beaches tend not to be glamorous, and any Scottish person who wants to argue with me is welcome to. They are absolute shitholes. End of. It is this sighting by the only witness that leads police to quickly rule the death as either suicide or accident. For them, this man's eyewitness report confirms what they thought. Annie had walked from the airport to the beach and had decided to kill herself. Of course, this wasn't a verified sighting. How could it be? The man was still debating whether the figure was male or female. But for police, it was enough. Further CCTV footage showed Annie arriving near the beach on foot from the airport just shortly before the witness saw the figure standing at the shore. This all but closed the case for police. And of course, what has to be asked is this: was that her standing on the beach looking out? And can we be certain that the footage of her seen walking into the town is really her? Or does this simply help tie the whole thing up into a nice, tidy bow? Now, I've read, and I've examined a lot of ideas around the suicide theory with Annie. Now, it's possible that whatever happened in those 3 missing minutes in the airport car park was enough to cause Annie to contemplate her life. Some theories suggest that she used the walk between the airport and the beach to mentally prepare herself for death. Whilst we can be 100% sure that the CCTV footage from the airport is Annie, a retired detective who looked closely at the footage of the figure assumed to be Annie arriving in Preswick town said, "I would question this identification." He said, "I have extensive experience of examining CCTV footage, and I must say honestly, the images are rubbish. I may assume that it's Annie, what with time and travel and direction, but detectives should never assume. They work with facts, not assumptions." He then adds, "We know Annie ended up on the beach, but the whole story is not known. They," and he's meaning police, "simply do not have a full picture of what happened. They know the start, which was the airport. They know the end, which was the beach, but they don't know the middle. In my opinion," he says, "they haven't achieved the mark in this case." So I think what he brings up is a brilliant point. It's an absolutely great point here. Let's just say for the sake of it, that yes, Annie was spotted in Preswick town at 4:30 on that Saturday afternoon. Yeah, let's even say that was Annie standing at the shore at 4:30 on that Saturday afternoon. But what happened between that Saturday afternoon and her body being found at 8 a.m. on the Sunday morning? That's 16 hours. Did she drown herself at 4:30 in the afternoon, and it took that length of time for the body to wash up the following morning? Well, I think that's what we're meant to believe happened. On a visit to Scotland, Annie's mother, Gaia, who was travelling with Annie's best friend from Sweden, they were able to meet the witness, the one who had seen the figure staring out to the sea. It happened sort of by chance. So Annie's mother and best friend, they were staying in the town of Preswick. They got chatting to someone in a local restaurant, and it turned out they knew the witness. And so the witness agrees to chat with Annie's mother. He confirmed everything he'd witnessed, but he added one vital thing. And the one vital thing he added, the family say, are why this case needs to be reopened. At no point when talking to police did police ever ask if he thought the figure was Annie Borjesson. Her name didn't even come up. His description of the figure was vague, And he clearly stated he was not sure if that was male or female. He couldn't tell you the height of that person. He couldn't tell you the general body shape of that person. He was hazarding a guess at who he thought was standing facing the water on that Saturday afternoon. So the jump to conclude that that was Annie was made by police. And it's an unfortunate truth, but this so-called sighting of her was probably the biggest mistake in the entire investigation. This so-called sighting, it halted any further search for clues. In part 1, I mentioned the inconsistencies between both post-mortems, the one done in Scotland and the one done in Sweden. And the biggest of those inconsistencies has to be that, yes, there was indeed water found in Annie's lungs, the main reason for the ruling of drowning. But what kind of water was found? Swedish pathologists tested it and found it to be fresh water, not, as they suspected it would be, seawater. The lack of algae usually found in seawater in her system points towards the conclusion that Annie was killed elsewhere and placed on that beach. The water in her system just does not hold up with the water on that beach. If she had, in fact, drowned where they say she did, then the water in her system would not be the kind that they found. Fresh water would only have come from a river. Had Annie drowned in a river, that was what would be in her system. The nearest river was miles away. Freshwater is more largely to be what would be in your system if you had drowned in a bath, or if someone had held your head under some water. This was not seawater in her lungs. This was not seawater in her system. The second major thing to be found by Swedish authorities was a large bruise at the back of Annie's head. The type of bruise, they say, which is likely to be caused by being hit with a heavy object. This blow to the head was never reported by Scottish pathologists. One of the most significant things discovered by the family and the team of people doing the post-mortem on Annie's body back in Sweden was Annie's hair. You may remember that I mentioned that Annie had waist-length blonde hair. The last known clear images of her taken in Scotland from CCTV from that afternoon in the airport show that her long hair is still there, it's still intact, and she has it tied up. When her body arrives in Sweden, her hair has been chopped off to only a few centimetres in length. Her mother describes it as clumps of hair all over her head, like it had been pulled from her scalp. Again, never reported, never mentioned in any of the Scottish reports. So no reason is ever given, although the question is asked loudly. What happened to Annie's hair? Why, when the body is back in Sweden? Is it missing all of that hair that's so evidently captured hours before her death? Are we to believe that she was so frantic prior to drowning herself that she clawed her own hair from her head? No, I don't think so. Surely that hair would have been found. So where did it go? Let's go back to what police found on that Sunday morning. Annie's jacket was located a few yards away from where her body lay. So, not wearing her jacket, we're to assume that prior to drowning herself, she took her jacket off. Annie's bag was located near her body. Had she kept her bag with her? Or did it just so happen that she drowned herself and her bag just happened to wash up right next to her? Her mother Gaia says, "I walked out into the sea where Annie's body was found, and after 220 metres, the sea was barely at my knees. If Annie, who was a strong swimmer, drowned herself, she would have had to be out a considerable distance, and it would be impossible for her body, her bag, and her coat to have washed up in exactly the same spot." One of the other questions that arises, and it's so important and it's so mysterious within this case, where was Annie's Filofax? Annie never went anywhere without it. Her friends say even on a night out to a club, Annie would have it with her. She kept in it all of the phone numbers, the addresses of friends, her work schedule, her little notes to remind her of places and people. But it wasn't in her bag. It wasn't on the beach. And it never turned up. A search of her home and her work in Edinburgh couldn't find it. Is it possible she lost it? No. Friends say no, because this is where she kept bank cards. This is where she kept money. And we know that Annie tried to access money from a cash point only hours before her death. So we know she had to have the Filofax with her. So where was it? Why was it never found? In the final part of The Body on the Beach, when her mother searched her daughter's personal email account, she discovered all of Annie's emails had been wiped. Gone. The email account was empty. The record of calls she had made were unavailable. Who had wanted to erase all of Annie's communication?